All right. Thank you, everybody who came back for the second session. We had a great first session. This session is called Sprinklr 101, Exploring and Harvesting Social Media Data with Sprinklr. And I guess at the same time as asking Valerie if she's ready, I should also ask Pranay if he's ready, because this features Valerie Jones and Pranay Joshi, who's from Sprinklr. So we have an expert here. Hopefully he's ready.
Yeah.
Can you tell Valerie?
Yeah, all good over here.
Okay, good. Awesome. Awesome. Okay, we're set. So just a reminder to everybody that throughout the session, use chat for your interactive comments, introductions, replies to speaker questions, technical difficulties. You can use chat for that as well. Use your question and answer button for substantive questions. Start your question with the speakers. Well, that was more relevant when we did the flash talks and we had like 18 different speakers, but we'll assume your questions this time are for Valerie and Pranay. And then if there are a lot of questions, it's helpful if you would upvote questions that you see that you would also like answered. And feel free to put those in anytime during the session. We can always stop for questions or save them to the end, but it'll be helpful to just put them in as you think of them, and then other people can respond if there are questions they have as well. And to upvote, you just go to that question and answer button and click that little thumbs up thing with regard to the question that you find interesting. And with that, I will turn this over to Valerie and Pranay.
All right, cool. So Pranay and I are going to tag team this here. But I wanted to start with, I don't want advanced sharing options. I just want to be able to share my screen. Here we go. I'm sure everyone appreciates like our stream of consciousness, right? We all have to sort of narrate exactly what we're thinking and what we're clicking on. So I just wanted to very briefly share kind of how we got to this point from the perspective of kind of Lisa and I with the Public Insight Lab here. So kind of how we got to Sprinklr too. So last summer, Lisa and I, and actually kind of the end of last year, spent a lot of time evaluating a number of social listening platforms. I'd kind of identified a need to bring together some social media research expertise on campus and across campuses. I know that there are people doing social media research across UNL, but there wasn't kind of a centralized hub for expertise or resources or access to tools. So that's what I was interested in. Lisa, as part of SBSRC and PPC, Public Policy Center, was also interested in that. And so we evaluated a number of different platforms that would help us be able to kind of provide access easily to social media data, to maybe remove a hurdle to, high levels of technical expertise to be able to get to the data in the first place. We engaged a number of stakeholders across campus in this as well, but the platforms that we got to that were kind of the leaders or the finalists in this very rigorous competition were Sprinklr and Meltwater/Sysmos and Nuvi. We consulted with other users as well. That's how we got in touch with Jameson at University of Alabama, with Lance Porter at Louisiana State, and with Brandon Boatwright at Clemson, who were also interested in similar things and had existing labs. And we ultimately ended up choosing Sprinklr for the volume and sources of data compared to others. The exportability, so it was easy to export into Excel. It became easy to export a random sample as well, which was a big deal. It was easy to use, and they were also interested in being a good partner, and made changes that we were interested in ourselves, such as, again, being able to export a random sample. And that's a big deal. They're also open about some of their AI and APIs and things like that, so willing to share technical expertise to help us feel comfortable with that choice as well. So we're pretty early adopters in using Sprinklr for academic research, and we're happy to chat about it a bit today. We formed this consortium, which we thought would sound fancy if we could put it on our CVs, that we formed a consortium. We also thought it'd be useful. Of Sprinklr users with the University of Alabama, Jameson has had his public opinion lab for a number of years. With Louisiana State, Lance has had his for a number of years as well, and with Clemson, Brandon has as well. And we also started forming a user group across University of Nebraska campuses. If you're interested in either of those things, if you use Sprinklr and want to join the Sprinklr Consortium, or if you're interested in a social media research user group here on campus, then shoot the Public Insight Lab an email, and I'll follow up with you. Pranay is going to talk about this too, but I just want to give you, from my perspective, here's kind of a super high level overview of some elements of Sprinklr's social listening tools. So for what the Public Insight Lab has access to, and Sprinklr can do more than this, but we're interested in the research portions in particular. And so we have access to this Listening Explorer version, which we call free, we pay for, but we don't have to pay anything additional for access to the full Firehose of Twitter, of news, blogs, and forums. And we can download as much data as we want without paying more than we already do through the Public Insight Lab. And there are 50 kind of seats or users available that we can share with different folks across campus who have a need for this. It's a great tool exactly for that, for exploration, for getting insights about relationships between variables, possible hypotheses, refining queries, things like that. And that's access to largely historical data. And then there's this listening topics thing that we'll talk more about too, where we are capped in the number of mentions that the Public Insight Lab pays for. This will all make more sense as Pranay talks in more detail too. But we can access we can access more historical data, so from a wider variety of sources. And we can also do real-time monitoring and capture data moving forward through Instagram, for example, if it's publicly available. And we have, again, kind of a cap on the number of mentions. So if this was developed initially as a marketing tool. So if I were monitoring the brand name of Nike and wanted real-time alerts, we would essentially be paying for a certain number of mentions of that word that we could have access to. So I wanted to give that kind of high-level perspective about these portions of Sprinklr that we'll be digging into a little more deeply throughout the course of the session here today. Pranay will talk more about this, but from my perspective, I appreciate how this Explorer version that we'll give you a demo of, so this version where you can access the full Firehose of Twitter and news and blogs and forums, super useful for those preliminary insights where you don't have to be doing any particularly difficult scraping to figure out if these variables are related, if there's a relationship between nicotine use and Adderall, which is something that one of our kind of test users was looking at, to refine those queries before you pull data from more sources. And then again, to download data really as much as you want. You can only download it in 10,000 K chunks for the existing kind of version that we have access to, but as Jameson pointed out, if we have access to the API, then we can maybe download bigger chunks than that. And with that, we did call it occlusion at first. Sorry, I'm looking at the chat. And then we're like, do we need to call it consortium to make it more CVable? Either of those is acceptable. With that, I'll stop my sharing and hand it off to Pranay, who is a success manager at Sprinklr and works with a number of us who have presented. So works with Alabama and LSU for sure. And he is an expert, and he'll take you into the tool so you can actually see what the heck we're talking about.
Thank you, Dr. Jones, for giving me the opportunity to speak and present over here. First of all, welcome to this particular session, and good morning and good afternoon to all the invitees and attendees of this call. With that, I would like to first present or give an overview of the Listening Explorer in general, and then go on to provide a demo of the Listening Explorer. So with that, I will go ahead and share my screen. Yeah. Okay. So when we talk from a listening perspective, what exactly is listening in Sprinklr or in general? Listening is actually a way of social intelligence data mining, which at the core of which resides keywords. So whenever we talk of listening, our main focus is to generate or create listening queries in such a way that for whatever use case that we are using listening and we would want to get those insights, we create a query with the help of either keywords or phrases or hashtags, which are separated by Boolean search operators. So when we talk specifically of listening in Sprinklr, it's related to query building that I mentioned. And with the help of those queries, we also can set up listening topics and can also go ahead and visualize the insights in the form of these widgets that have been shown over here, right? And I believe some of the widgets have already been discussed earlier in the presentations. So I will now go ahead and provide some more understanding of the different types of listening available in Sprinklr. So the first, so in Sprinklr, as Dr. Jones also mentioned, we have two types of listening. The first one is the listening insights or the topics. And the second one is the listening explorer. So when it comes to listening insights, it's predominantly used for, creating listening queries or topics for which you would want to store and receive data on an ongoing basis. Whereas for listening explorer, it's predominantly used for, getting analytics and insights on ad hoc search queries, mostly for exploratory and research-oriented work. When we talk of listening insights, we have a cap on the mentions that come of the annual listening data allowance that is a part of the contract or the agreement. But when you talk of listening explorer, there is actually no limit to the number of mentions that can be fetched. And it also, while listening topics or the listening insights supports more than 20 plus listening sources that Sprinklr offers, when we talk specifically from a listening explorer point of view, the number of sources that currently supported by Listening Explorer are limited, which is Twitter, news, blogs, and forums that Dr. Jones mentioned in their slide previously. Then, going on to the next set of slides, which would talk more from a Listening Explorer perspective. So I will go ahead and talk about those. Yeah, so this particular, the next couple of slides would actually provide an understanding of how we can go ahead and navigate to the Listening Explorer section in the Sprinklr platform. So in order to do that, we have to go into the modern research part of the product that Sprinklr offers and navigate under the Listen section and go on to the Explorer subsection, where you will find quick search option available, which is about the Listening Explorer. And for Listening Explorer, as I mentioned, it is used for broad trend queries and also for understanding queries related to research-oriented work. Going to the next slide. Yeah, so once you are into the quick search window, I'll obviously discuss and present all this with a live demo of the platform shortly. But once we go into the quick search option, you would be able to create your listening query or listening search query with the help of Boolean search operators and or and will be able to get those actionable insights at the tip of your fingers within a matter of seconds. So with now, having said all that, here's a final deck or a slide which helps to understand the sources, the features, and limitations of Listening Explorer in general. So when we talk of Listening Explorer, it supports Twitter, news, blogs, Reddit, and forums as of now. And apart from that, if there are any data from other sources that is captured, that is only due to the active topic queries that are present at that particular amount of time. So when we talk of any historical data, fetching any historical data, that can only be fetched from Twitter, news, blogs, Reddit, and the forums and the sources that I mentioned here. So exactly as an extension to that, since Listening Explorer supports only a limited amount of sources, the data from Listening Explorer should only be considered from an exploratory purpose and should not be considered as a complete or comprehensive volume of data. In order to get the insights on all the comprehensive volume of data, from all the sources that Sprinklr supports, you would need to get access to the listening insights or the listening topics section. Apart from that, the limitations that Dr. Valerie mentioned is only with the export part that we can, export only in batches of 10K. So that was all I had with respect to an insight on the Listening Explorer or an overview. I will now go ahead and provide a quick demo of the Listening Explorer on the platform. But before that, if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer those questions.
So no questions have come in just yet, but people are welcome to add them into the question and answer or the chat anytime they'd like. Oh, there is actually a question. Awesome. Does the application support other languages aside from English?
Yes, the application supports more than 7 languages. So I can obviously share the link and the PDF of the article that lists out all the languages that we have as support for Listening Explorer, as well as listening in general from Sprinklr's end.
Okay, so if you want to move on.
Okay, I believe we don't have any more questions, or I can see some questions in chat. Okay, these are not questions. So I'll now go ahead and give a demo of the Listening Explorer. So once again, I'll share my screen. Okay. Is the screen visible?
Yep.
Yes, we can see it, Pranay.
Okay, great. So when we talk of the Listening Explorer, as I had mentioned and discussed in my deck as well, I'm currently in the University of Nebraska's workspace, and to access the Listening Explorer, we would need to go into the modern research part of the platform, and from there we need to go into the listen section and navigate to the quick search option available under the Explorer subsection. So once we do that, you will be navigated to the screen wherein you can type in your exact search query for which you would want to get some insights on the mentions breakdown, on the demographics of those mentions, even the content, the top content associated with those mentions, and so on and so forth. So for demo purposes, I will go ahead and take a query or a simple query which would talk about a familiar topic or a familiar phrase that we had come across earlier in our call today from Dr. Smith, which was with respect to drought and the mentions or the conversations that have been attributed from United States of America or USA in general. So for that, if I would want to create a listening query or a search query which would try to provide insights from conversations that would have any mention of drought or and should also be from USA or United States of America. So this is how I can go ahead and create a simple search query in the Listening Explorer. I can just type in drought, and I can type in a search operator, and can also just use United States of America and enclose it within double quotes, because I would like to ensure that I get the conversations which would have drought as well as United States of America as well over here. So if I click on explore, in the last 30 days, this is a time frame that is completely flexible, by which we can go ahead and even select the different time frames. So in the last 30 days, according to the search query that we have created, this is the number of mentions that have been gathered across the digital and social ecosystem, and of course the listening sources that the Listening Explorer supports. Then the reach of this topic, as well as the net sentiment score, which also provides a breakdown of the positive and negative mentions as well. Then, of course, in order to understand the trend of the mentions of this particular query that we have created, we also have this widget which can actually help anyone or any user to understand, if there has been abnormal spikes in the trend of these mentions. And that's exactly how the team can also understand if there's any particular activity or any event associated that led to a spike in all of these mentions. Then, of course, we have some other widgets as well, which can help the team to understand that for the topic or for the query that we have created, what are the most talked about themes of discussion. And then accordingly, if the team would want to go ahead and select or navigate to one specific area of those themes, the team can do that by clicking on over here on any of these themes and navigating further. Then, of course, there are a couple of widgets that can also help the team to understand that out of all these mentions, what is the number of what is the most used content type in these mentions. By content type, we basically try to classify on the basis of whether a particular conversation has only text, has text as well as a photo, has a text as or a link also associated with it, and text and a video as well. So in this case, you can see that out of the mentions that we have, the breakdown of the mentions that have at least one photo is 174, followed by the mentions that would have at least a link associated with those mentions. So from here, it can actually help the team to understand, what type of asset or what type of media object is actually being used with the conversations or mentions by the users. And accordingly, they can go ahead and add filters over here to ensure that according to the use cases, for example, when we talk of drought or similar, natural calamities, we would want to see conversations that would have more of photos and video associated with it. So this is how the team can add in filters over here, and also go ahead and filter the mentions on the basis of either the content type or even on the basis of sentiment of the mentions, because for certain use cases, there might be a possibility to get an insight only on the negative mentions, especially when we talk of crisis communications or PR. So the negative sentiment communications or mentions are really helpful for the team to get an insight corresponding or related to the positive mentions. So then we have some other widgets as well, which were also discussed earlier, which can help the team to understand the breakdown of those particular sources of those mentions in the last 30 days. So depending on the time range that you have selected, the sources and the data might differ. So this, as you can see, we are currently in the summary section of this Listening Explorer dashboard. But in order to understand and have a deep dive of some of the metrics and insights that we have received over here, we have these dedicated sections of the dashboard available over here, which would talk about either the content or which will give a more robust breakdown of the sentiment, the demographics, and of course, the audience breakdown as well. So if I go to the content section, we have these widgets which are by default, which can help the team to understand the most recent post and the most recent articles, along with the most hashtags which are most popularly used, and of course the top terms of discussion with the help of the word cloud, which we discussed some time back in the presentation. Then, of course, going on to the sentiment analysis. So with the mentions that we have received in this particular time, this sentiment specific page or tab would help the team to understand the breakdown of the sentiments of the various conversations on the basis of different geographies as well, and on the basis of different hashtags also. Then on the basis of the positive and negative mentions, we have a word cloud that can also help the team to get some more insights and analytics on what are the most frequently used words which are associated with positive sentiment mentions or conversations. And then, of course, going into the demographic section of the platform, we have this particular widget, which actually helps to give the breakdown of the locations from where the mentions are getting fetched. And of course, depending on the users who have specified or disclosed their gender publicly in various forums or social sources, you will also be able to get the breakdown by different genders and also by different countries over here as well. Then going on to the last audience section that we have these specific widgets which can also help the team to understand who are the top advocates that are talking more about conversations that have brought or United States of America, and who are the top detractors, or who are the users who are talking more in a negative way. And then we also have the top prolific users and the top influencers as well, who are talking mostly about these particular conversations related to drought and United States of America. So we can, of course, as I said, Listening Explorer, the primary use of that is for exploratory and research purposes, and it also helps the team to first test a particular listening query, so that if the team feels that this particular listening query is apt and is fetching the relevant data, the team can then go ahead and utilize this particular listening query and create a listening topic out of the same, which would go on and fetch the mentions on a continuous basis. But if the team would like to go ahead and make some modifications to the listening query or the listening search, they can do it right from here and include some additional keywords as well in order to make the listening query more refined and get more refined analytics and insights from the Listening Explorer. And once as Dr. Jones mentioned, and it was mentioned in the slide as well, we also have the option of exporting all this data in the form of various sources available. We can either export the entire dashboard, or we can export individual widgets as well. So when we talk of exporting the entire dashboard, we can just click on the more actions option available over here and click on export. So which will lead us to this screen in which we would have the option of selecting all the different tabs or the individual tabs as well, and also selecting the export type if we would want it in the form of PDF or Excel or PPT or CSV. And then once we have made our selections, we can go ahead and click on export, and that's how the team can export all this data, and that data would be available for your research purposes within a matter of seconds. So apart from this, if the team would want to go ahead and export a widget, we can do that by clicking on the three horizontal dots available next to each widget. And from there, we have these options of export widget, which can be exported in the same format as we had for exporting a dashboard. So that's how we can go ahead and leverage the Listening Explorer for understanding a particular listening query and the traction associated with that in a particular time frame. The data for Listening Explorer is available from March 2015 onwards. So you can even look at that data till that, you can look at the historical data till that point of time. And as I said, Listening Explorer only supports a few listening sources, but it really helps the team to get an insight into whether a particular listening query or a listening search would actually have traction and will have a use case for creating a listening query or a listening topic out of it. So that's what I had with respect to the demo for Listening Explorer. And I'm happy to take any questions that the team would have.
Great. Pranay, we've got some questions coming up related to how Sprinklr calculates and determines different things. So the first question is, how does Sprinklr calculate the top influencer metrics within a specific topic?
Yeah, so when we talk of a specific topic or a listing query, when we talk of top influencers, the algorithm that is generally taken into consideration is, because this is all AI backed, and it takes into account all the conversations at first, and then also looks at their following data and the amount of reach that they have initially. And on the basis of that, the algorithm is able to define the influencers and the advocates or the detractors in general.
And do you share like we've talked about specific algorithms and so on, like exactly what goes into the data? Do you guys share that?
So that data is all a part of the API that various listening sources provide to us. So that is how the data is getting fetched, and it is being collaborated at the backend with the help of the complex algorithms that we have. I can check with our product team to see if we would be able to share the algorithms that are there in general. But as I mentioned, it's all a part of the API, and then based on the API, our AI kicks in and tries to use a lot of factors into consideration, which is basically the answer to the next question as well. How does the application define positive and negative mentions? So it takes into account a lot of factors, which is the text. It analyzes the text. It analyzes even to a certain extent the photos and even the asset which is associated with it, and then goes ahead and tries to associate a sentiment with a particular conversation. But the icing on the cake over here is, although our AI is around 84 to 85% accurate, but we do have the option of updating the sentiment associated with a conversation manually as well, because that in a way helps the AI to sort of train itself automatically and provide more accurate results in the future. So that's how the application goes ahead, and the platform, with the help of AI, tries to define positive and the negative sentiment associated with the mentions. And the same goes for the gender as well. As I mentioned, since Sprinklr only takes use of the publicly available data, if there are any users who would have mentioned in their bio or anywhere else in their feed about their gender, that is how the platform is encapsulating that particular gender data onto the platform and showing you with the help of all those widgets.
So are you saying, Pranay, that that it's not just looking at whether or not on their profile they selected a certain gender, it's actually looking through their feed to do more AI predictive?
No, so it only takes a look at the data or their mention that they have done on their profile bio, nothing else.
Okay, sorry. That's what I thought, but when you were answering, I was like, it sounded like something different. And I know some researchers kind of following up on these questions have expressed interest in knowing like at a greater depth how things work. And I think I don't want to interrupt you in Valerie's presentation. So if you have some more to show or do, I don't want to interrupt it, but maybe if there's time, you could show how you do some of the tweaking of the algorithm, you know, by designating some things as positive or negative. I don't know if that's possible to show.
Yeah, so maybe I can first answer a couple of questions that I can see in chat. Does Explorer access the entire Twitter Firehose? Yes. If so, how far back does it go? So as I mentioned, it goes on till 2015, the data that we have in the Listening Explorer. So from 2015, you can get the access to all the data in the Twitter Firehose. Okay. Do we have any more questions?
Yeah, and I would just say, I think that would be great to do what Lisa suggested, show how you can, because one of the things that we liked about Sprinklr too is that if things were being coded in a way that you didn't agree with, you could kind of change that coding. Since obviously different words are used differently in different contexts. So we thought that was useful. And Pranay and I didn't talk about this, so this would be putting you on the spot. But I would say if anybody in the chat or in the audience has a burning desire to see like a certain search performed in Explorer, we could probably do that. And if you want to make a suggestion about here's what I would like to see, how would we get to this? Then I bet Pranay, I've worked with you long enough, he would be able to do it.
And just to add to that, if you're an attendee, you can just raise your hand and I'll see you fly to the top, and then I can allow you to speak and you can make your requests. There is another question also in the question and answer about whether Sprinklr can be used for data in other languages, like for Chinese social media data.
Can Sprinklr be used for data in other languages? So we do support different languages, but I would like to get some more information on this particular question. When we talk of data in other languages, does that mean you're trying to fetch data in other languages?
So I'm going to try to find this participant. Sorry, I have to scroll through some and then let you speak. He says yes, or she says yes. Sorry, they say yes. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, so when we talk of the Chinese, when we talk of data in other languages, as I mentioned, we support the fetching of data in more than 7 languages. So that is something which is readily available. And of course, in the listening topic section that we have, whenever we go ahead and create a particular topic, we also have the options to add some additional filters in the form of languages. Let's say if you would want to filter the mentions coming in only from a particular language, we do also have that option available on the platform, and even from different geographies as well. So if you would want to listen to only conversations from a particular geography, you would have that filter available right at the topic creation wizard that we have.
And sorry if I mispronounce your name, Mia Hung. I did give you the option to speak if you want to talk a little bit more about your questions and your use case.
Still on mute.
Yeah, I did the ask to unmute, but maybe they don't want to ask their question. Anyway, I will leave you as able to talk. If you want to unmute at any point, feel free to do that, and you can talk more about your use case.
Lisa, if I could just jump in for a sec, if that's okay. And clearly, Valerie and Pranay, great job on the presentation. So when you and Pranay showed, sort of the ability to go out and listen through using Sprinklr. And one of the things I think that's really important around the listening capability is the AI behind it. And so our AI is essentially, just to give you a little background, is homegrown. We really started utilizing and introduced AI in Sprinklr in 2015. And it's been used extensively with the commercial, businesses that we work with and organizations. About 80 plus top brands out of the Forbes 100 brands internationally. And so it's really kind of exciting that we now have this and have had this for a couple of years here. So our higher ed friends can use it. But our AI makes about 10 billion predictions a day, 10 billion with a B. It actually can listen in over 100 different global languages. We have the technology can be presented in, I think Pranay mentioned 7, but we have the ability to listen in to over 100 global languages. And so one of the channels, the many channels that we can listen in and support is WeChat. And so we have done presentations, for example, with some of our international recruitment friends in higher ed that may be looking to recruit out of China, for example, and WeChat's used pretty extensively in China. So we do have that capability. But the AI itself is as Pranay mentioned, very accurate. And it is trainable. So you have the ability to, look at different posts. And if for some reason that post says it's negative, for example, if you're looking at it through a sentiment lens, you can actually turn and make that sentiment, change it to a positive post or a negative post if it were mislabeled. And the AI will actually over time learn and train and become better and more accurate, which is really pretty exciting and powerful. The AI, and then I'll turn it back to the presenters, but the AI, we actually have 8 different sort of layers of our artificial intelligence. And it looks at things like natural language processing, anomaly detection, trends, predictive analysis, all these different sort of layers, if you will. And that's what makes that unstructured data, as I mentioned earlier, these tweets, the likes, the posts, whatever it is, it takes all that unstructured data and it makes it really actionable, as I mentioned earlier on the call. So anyway, but that's a little bit more detail maybe around the artificial intelligence. So that helps you, hopefully gives you a little bit more information around how does Sprinklr, take all of that data and sort of turn it into something that can be usable in your research and in your analysis. So. I'll turn it back to whomever. Or maybe we're still taking questions.
And then Pranay, did you have an example of a spreadsheet that you could share of the data? Otherwise, I can get one as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I have that, and
Perfect.
I can do that. Let me share my screen. Yes. So this is, the export of a listening query, that we had created for understanding the conversations around coronavirus and the vaccine. So, and this particular export of, that widget is about the most popular posts that are, that are coming as a part of that particular listening query in the listening explorer. So the export of any widget or a dashboard as well would look something like this, that it will have a lot of headings associated to each and every attribute of a particular, be it a particular user, be it a particular user profile, the title of that particular message, and of course the message text as well. I'll just make this a bit more readable. Yeah. Okay, so this is where the team can understand the type of the listening source from where the data has been fetched. Then we have some the user screen names as well as the Twitter or the exact social profile handles from where this particular conversation has been fetched. And of course, we have some follower specific metric as well, which I mentioned. The AI also takes into account all these things and then tries to club them into different buckets of followers, influencers, detractors, and so on and so forth. Then we also have, as I said, the message, the entire conversation that is exported as a part of the sheet. Then also we have some other details as well, which I believe the University of Alabama team is using with respect to the time that has been created. This particular mention or this conversation was posted. Then the asset type associated with a particular conversation or a mention. And we also have, going ahead, the exact domain as well over here from where this particular mention or conversation was fetched onto the platform. So from here, the team can also get a breakdown apart from, seeing all the visualizations on the platform as to the exact source and the exact URL of the conversation or stream from which this particular post or mention is getting fetched for a particular listening query. So this is how a typical export of any widget actually looks like. And I believe Dr. Jones and the team at University of Nebraska are, effectively utilizing it in their research-oriented purposes. So, Dr. Jones, would you like to provide a bit of information on the vaccine initiative and the topics, that are currently set up in the Nebraska's workspace?
Yeah, so we had some conversations with the mayor's office, who was particularly interested in learning about vaccination in Lincoln, but particularly about kind of sources of influence about vaccination in Lincoln, particularly from kind of official sources. So, and from the perspective of the mayor's office, one of the key questions was, is the mayor tweeting about this, about just getting vaccinated? Does it politicize this topic? And is it helpful in driving maybe conversation and influence, or is it not? Does it maybe inflame conversation in some ways? And so Dr. Wong and I, from the prior flash talks, have been looking at sources of information from the mayor's office, from the city of Lincoln, from the health department, and from Bryan LGH, which is a major hospital here in Lincoln, to look at just the influence of the information, how people interacted with it. And then we're also trying to add a qualitative piece to it in talking to the social media managers for those accounts, to also get a sense of how interaction between departments, and if there is any interaction coordination between departments, to help ensure that this public health message that is important for the health and safety of the community for sure, and certainly the larger community as well, to see how that information can kind of best be coordinated and distributed and shared. And then I saw that Kelly had a question, and the data in the spreadsheet can be downloaded 10K at a time. Is that correct? And that is correct. But Pranay or Tom or Rich, can anybody talk a little bit about the Sprinklr API that Jameson was talking about? Is it possible then to download more than 10K at a time through the API?
Yeah, so that is only restricted, the 10K limit is only restricted to the Listening Explorer. When we talk of listening insights or the listening topics, that is where that, that export thing or that unlimited thing really kicks in.
Is Is there a similar limit though with just the listening?
Sorry, Lisa, can you come up with
So
that
I know
again?
I know there's Explorer and then there's just the listening that's not
Insights.
Explorer. Insights, yeah, sorry about that. Are there limits also with Insights?
Yes, but the thing is that it goes on to a very bigger value to the tunes of, I think, 2 million, if I'm correct. So you can export it up to 2 million at a time, but anywhere after that, you will have to do it in batches or in buckets of data.
So when Jameson was talking about the API, was he talking about an API specifically for Explorer?
I believe Professor Jameson was talking about the listening insights API, because that also includes more listening sources as well. Apart from the ones that are already available in Listening Explorer. So I believe he was talking from a listening insights perspective, because I was in one of his calls wherein he had specifically asked about a task associated with an export of the mentions, which ran up to quite a high amount, to the tune of 1 million or so. And that's exactly where that sampling feature came into the question. And that's how, with the help of sampling, you can reduce the amount of mentions that you can fetch from a particular topic, because with the specific use case that Professor Jameson had, when we created the listening topic and did an estimation by our Listening Explorer, it was telling us that the listening mentions count in that particular time frame would go more than 3 million and more than 5 million. So for research purposes, then he mentioned if there's a way by which we can go ahead and maybe pick up a random amount or a sampling based amount. So that's exactly where that sampling feature under the listening insights section really helps to limit the amount of mentions that one is fetching.
And I should point out for anybody listening in that Jameson will also be back to present it at let's see, 1:45 today, I think. So.
Yeah, and just to add on to what Pranay just said, so Listening Explorer is kind of akin to, a Google search, if you will, right, of what's out there from a social media standpoint, but it doesn't necessarily include all the sources that Sprinklr has access to. And Listening Insights, where we start to kind of take a look at the broader sort of pipeline, if you will, of publicly available data out there. That's where Listening Insights really gives you access to more. So where Listening Explorer is really helpful is sort of maybe for the students' research, for those preliminary sort of samplings, or if you want to just kind of get a sense for what's being said about a particular topic and running it through our artificial intelligence to give you some preliminary insights and maybe sort of hone your hypotheses or your what you're trying to really zero in on. It kind of gives you that capability. So that's where that really kicks in. And then in Listening Insights, you have more obviously sources to grab from. But in addition to that, you have other sort of advanced search features, if you will, around, for example, themes or keywords or domain lists or things like that. So anyway, there are differences there, I guess, but those give you at least a little bit of comparison between the two.
I guess one other question I have, just to be completely clear, is do we have a cap on how many tweets we can download? Like if I want to download a complete record of drought tweets based on this search that I've honed over the years from 2015 forward, can I do that through Listening Explorer without kind of maxing out? I don't want to take everybody's ability to download tweets from UNL. I don't know if we have a max or not.
So that's exactly where Listening Explorer really helps, because one of the differences between Listening Explorer and Insights is that Listening Explorer will provide you the data which would not count towards your contracted mentions count, but the Listening Insights data and any topic or listening query created under that will count towards the contracted mentions data. So that's the main difference, and that's exactly as Tom mentioned. Listening Explorer is primarily used more for preliminary research or for exploratory purposes in order to understand attraction associated with a particular listening query or a topic.
Pranay, do you want to show us really quickly how should I do that? Because in Explorer, you could export all of that data, right? You could download all of that data, but you still have to do it 10,000 at a time, right? So the last I knew, you kind of had to like break it up into chunks by date and kind of estimate what a 10,000 tweet date range would be, and then like stop it and then download another chunk. That's the case with Explorer, right?
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be on a date based. It would automatically cut off, the count of mentions which will go over and above 10,000. So it doesn't have to be associated with any particular date, but let's say if in a 30 days time frame for any particular listening query in a listening explorer, if you notice that the count of mentions is more than 10K, then you would obviously be able to only export 10K mentions at a time, and then go ahead and use a bit of trial and error with respect to the date range to see how can we fetch the rest of the listening the mentions count for any mention above 10,000.
So it sounds like, Lisa, possible to do it all through Explorer for free, just time consuming, or possible to do it through Insights, but then it would count against our mentions. But we could probably estimate to see how much that would be.
Yeah, and of course the biggest benefit that you get from Insight is that you can also go ahead and set up topics for which you would want to get data on the go and data on a continuous basis, because we have certain use cases specifically when it comes to higher ed, basically talking of commencements or enrollments or academic research purposes regarding a particular hashtag or a trend for which the team would like to monitor it on a continuous basis. So that's exactly where the listening insights really help, because Listening Explorer will only give you the data which is in the past or in the current day. It will not give you data on an ongoing basis. So that's how it differentiates from Listening Insights. Yeah, I guess we are right on time then.
Thank you so much, Pranay. That was super helpful. And I threw it in the chat. You can link to, I threw the registration link in there again. So on that registration page that you all went to, you can get contact info for any of the presenters, including Pranay if you'd have additional questions, or Tom, or any of our Sprinklr friends who will be here throughout the rest of the day too. Or any of our presenters, again, if you'd like to learn more about their research. So now I've got some time for questions if anybody has them. Lisa, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't have any questions. I was just going to say, yeah, last chance. If anyone wants to ask a question, you can raise your hand and I'll give you permission to speak, or if you want to post one. The alternative plan, I'm just talking, so in case somebody wants to post a question, they can. The alternative plan is just, we'll all take a break. We'll all go have lunch until 12:30, which is when the next session starts, which is in about half an hour. So
Right.
Watching the various channels. I will say if any attendees are listening in and you come back, since we'll all be gone to lunch because there don't seem to be any questions, you can still though put things in the question and answer thing, and we'll see them when we get back. And maybe we'll unmute early to see if we can try to answer things. And we will still be recording and try to make the recordings available later, I think, probably on Valerie's website.